This tutorial is an alternative version for building the ground road. Currently, I'm starting from the manual, so again, let me point out this is not required. You do not have to do it this way. This is just a fun alternative way if you want to attempt to automate the whole process of building a road using C# scripts. So go ahead, come over here and do the one thing you're going to say, why? We're going to delete these. Yes, delete all the ground road elements. We're going to keep the road parent element, the empty element. That's important. We want to do that. Next, what you'll do is I'm going to remove the 90 degrees. You can keep that there if you want, but for this example, I'm going to remove it. Next, basically minimize or collapse the course library. Go ahead on the drop down in the project, select folder, and then create a directory called scripts. Again, in the original tutorial, they eventually get to a point where they have you create a directory called scripts. Then within scripts, right click, or you can also click from the drop down and create a new C# script. I'm going to call this C# script build road. I know, very original. Next, what I am going to do is click on the road element up here, or the road component in the hierarchy, and I'm going to say add component. Then, in my search feature, I'm going to type road, or you can also type build. The point is you want to attach the build road script. So go ahead and attach that. Good, we're good so far. Next, double click in the project window under scripts, build road. This should open up the script in Visual Studio. Next, above the line that says start is called before the first frame update, add some white space. We're going to create a new member public variable, which we will call road element, and it will be of type game object. So we say simply public game object, and the reason why I'm using Visual Studio is because it has assistance, or it's basically telling me, is this what you want to type? Game object, and then I'm going to call it road element. I could call it component, but I'm so used to hearing the term element that I'm going to call it element. Next, underneath update in the closing parentheses, add some additional white space, and we're going to create a new method that we're going to call road size. This is going to be a method that basically, obviously, allows us to define the size of the road we want to generate on start. So we type void road size, and then I'm going to give it a parameter using an integer. So we say int, and I'm going to call the name num, open and close, enter, and then it's going to say, all right, time to build your method. Next, I'm going to generate a for loop. So we type for, and then it says tab twice to auto-generate this, so tab. Next, I'm going to change the text here that says maxed to match the parameter num. Then within this, we're going to generate again a new game object. So we're going to say game object, and I'm going to call this new road element, and then I'm going to assign it I'm not sure if this is a class or if this is an interface, but we're going to assign it the method, function, whatever you want to call it, initialize, or instantiate. And then instantiate calls for a few parameters. It has 10 overloaded options, and if you're not familiar with programming, don't worry about that right now. We're going to focus on the one that uses 3 of them. So we're going to assign it an original object first, which is the object we've created up here called road element. So we say road element. I'm going to add a semicolon here so I can ignore that little squiggly error, notice. And then after road element, I'm going to add a comma, a space, and I'm going to say in lowercase new vector type 3 parentheses, and then within the parentheses it's saying please provide a value for the positions of x, y, and z. So for x we're going to say 0, for y we're going to say 0, But for Z, we're going to tell it, and you can put this in parentheses or you don't have to. We're going to say for the current iteration of the loop, that's what this is, so it's going to run n number of times or number of times. We're going to say, based on that, we want to multiply it by an increment of 5. Just like we did in the manual where we manually moved it 5 points each time, this will do the same thing starting with the first index. Next, we need our third parameter. I'm not going to get too detailed into it, but it's something called quaternion, I believe is what it's used, and we're going to use the Euler method. If you're unsure of what Euler is, go ahead on Wikipedia and type in Euler axes, and it explains that it's a focus of how these 6 axes within 3-dimensional space work. So go ahead and type quaternion, man, that's a unique word, followed by Euler, and then opening and closing parentheses. This is using 3 axes as well, but this is the 3 axes of rotation. So we're going to type 0, 0, 0. And then what I'm going to do, because I changed the object originally, let me jump back into Unity so you know what I'm talking about, is that under course library, our ground road, we changed the rotation of Y back to 0. So if I jump back into Visual Studio, what I'm going to say now is for each of these new objects, rotate it at 90 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Next, we're going to name each of these new elements. So every time a new road element is generated from the loop here, we want to give it a name so it doesn't look the same. So they're not all called ground road, ground road, ground road, ground road. That would be frustrating beyond reason. Next, go ahead and using the variable name, we say new road element dot name, and we assign it a string value. Now I'm going to use string interpolation. If you're unsure of what that is, go ahead and look into it. I'm going to call it ground underscore road open close parentheses, and then in here I'm going to put curly brackets. Notice they turn white, and I'm going to say the current iteration plus the number 1. So when it generates the first iteration, if you're not familiar with how iterations work, the first iteration is going to start at 0. So 0 plus 1 is going to equal 1, so the first generated object or component will be called ground 1. The next one will be ground 2, 3, 4, until we hit 40. Last, for this part, we are going to assign all these elements into the parent element. So instead of being separated outside and have a bunch of objects free, just like we did manually, they're going to be automatically moved, aka transformed, into the empty parent road element, or sorry, road component we've created. So we say new road element. I probably should have called this component because that might be slightly confusing. Transform dot parent is equal to transform. And we go ahead and save. Last, do not skip over yet. We need to invoke this method. We need to actually make it run. So go ahead and type road size in parentheses, and let's set it up for 40. And with a semicolon, save it, and then jump on back over to Visual Studio. Click on the road component in the hierarchy, and then notice over here under the script, we now have a new field that says road element. So this is the one that we just built, and it's saying, what would you like to generate 40 times and rotate as well? So what we can do is we can do this 2 ways. You can come over here and click, and then underneath the assets for the pop-up, obviously type ground road. So you can do it that way, or you can also click and drag the component onto the empty field. So there you have it. And then next I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And up here I will click the play button, and let's see what happens. Let's make sure the rotate works correctly. And there you have it. Look at that. 40 road tile pieces all generated. Now let's say we wanted 100. So we could technically jump back into Visual Studio and say, well, That's nice, but I'd like actually 100. And so we save it, come back, pause, or remove the play, run it again, and now we have 100. Very simple, very straightforward. You won't see them at the moment when you set it up, but let's say you actually do want to see an element there. What you could also do initially is drag a copy of the ground road clone, or we'll call it for this sake, start, rotate it at 90. Let's stop that. Oh, let's do that one more time. Sorry about that. It was in the play mode. So we can place this up here. Let's put it right above. And we'll call it ground road start. -90. And there it is. And if we run it again, it'll just be overlaying with all 40 that we have auto-generated, so that we at least know where to place assets later on. So again, this is an alternative version. You don't have to do it this way, but I found it to be fun. So let me know if you enjoyed it or not.